So, welcome to this episode of the Strengthening Communities podcast. I'm your host, Mark Boorse, and just to frame out the conversation for today a little bit, the big idea of the podcast series is that our communities are whole, our communities are their strongest when everybody has a sense of belonging to that community. And sort of put the other way, when we marginalize people or people are left out, people don't feel like they belong, it actually diminishes the community that we're in. And so what we want to do is, in terms of strengthening the community, is to have a dialogue and invite people into that dialogue to talk about the spaces, topics that are important in our community, the spaces in our community where people might be left out or they might not feel like they have full membership. These are often topics that we provide services for, but we really want to think through the issues from a community level and to talk through them that way. So June is Pride Month, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. Like, what's that about in the community? How do people experience it? How do we connect with each other? How do we engage with each other around the issues that are important to people in the community and to us as a community as whole? So I have several guests with us today, Lindsey and Alex and Dottie. Do you guys want to just talk a little bit about just like who you are and why this is an important issue to you?
Sure. I can start it off. So I'm Lindsey. I use they, them pronouns. And Pride Month is something that's really important to me because I'm a person of the queer and LGBTQIA plus community. And I'm very grateful for my experience and the acceptance that the people in my life have had for me, but yeah. I know that that's not the story for everyone. So Pride Month is really important to help uplift our community, remind our community that they are accepted, that they are needed, they are worth it, they are not a burden.
Yeah.
And that is a huge reason why I like to celebrate it, and I make an effort to continue that outside of June too.
Yeah. Cool. Alex or Dottie, do you want to respond to that? Just sort of who you are and why this topic is important to you.
Yeah, sure. My name is Dottie. I use any pronouns. Pride Month for me is really a celebration of triumph. There's a lot of like struggles that the queer community has had when they're trying to accomplish something or gain some right. And Pride Month is a time to celebrate all of that and then highlight new struggles, new ways that we are kind of raising up and trying to get the equity that we deserve. I think a big part of it for me too is that the Pride Month is a time to celebrate my found family and everybody that I hold near and dear. So definitely it's kind of all the above for me.
Yeah. Thanks. That's good. That's helpful.
Yeah, I'm kind of similar to Dottie. My name is Alex or Ali. I use they them pronouns and identify as trans. So identify with LGBTQIA plus community. So this is, a topic that, hits close to home, both personally and with people who are, chosen family, again, similar to what Dottie was saying, and also, furthering education as well. It's a time for reflection, of course, but also, humanizing the community and, communicating the different things that are needed and celebrating those as wins.
Nice. Both Dottie and Alex have used the word or the term chosen family. Can you just talk to me a little bit about that and how is it related to this whole idea of community being whole when everybody belongs?
Yeah, I was not as fortunate to have an accepting family, unfortunately, but what I did was, as soon as I was able to, I kind of separated and found and built my own family. It's hard work. You have to build it brick by brick, but you find people that are close to you that accept you, and um, you love them just as you would family.
Nice. Cool. And Alex, you used the word human and just sort of the human connection or helping people see the humanity of it. Can you just expound a little bit or take that a little bit farther?
Yeah. So, you know, a lot of the struggles or the difficulty that occur in the queer community, especially the trans community, are, a refusal of autonomy and just ability to define oneself and speak for oneself. Like there's a lot of situations in which things like name changing is normalized, or changing your style is normalized as long as it's within certain bounds. And what I see a lot of what occurs to the queer community is dehumanizing in that there isn't that provided space to communicate who we are, who they are.
Yeah. Yeah. You guys have each talked a little bit about this, but I want to just sort of stay with this for a minute. So, why Pride Month? What's being celebrated, and why is it important? Lindsey, you talked about it not just being a month, but a celebration, that needs to keep going. So, can each of you or some of you reflect a little bit on just why Pride Month and what's being celebrated?
I can kick it off. Well, historically, the Stonewall riots occurred in June. And that is why we have Pride Month happening in June. There were many folks before us, trans women, people of color, people of the queer community, who fought loudly and very hard to get us to where we are now. The community has made a lot of strides, of course. We've had a lot of wins, but there's still room for the world to accept us even further.
Yeah.
And I'll let Dottie or Alex pick it up there.
Yeah, I think Pride Month for me is kind of an extension of a lot of those efforts that have been made in the past, and it's both a recognition of the past and kind of a celebration of where we can go in the future. Um, for me, Pride Month is like an excellent opportunity to expand our horizons.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, both what Lindsay and Dottie were saying, it's kind of this three-tier thing of reflection, celebration, and education, where, you're able to reflect on the different things that were, have occurred in queer history and, celebrate the things that are currently here and then educate on the different places that, are still needed to expand on. So everyone has, a space at the table.
Yeah. It occurs to me that when we're talking about this way, that this is really about a civil rights issue, and it's sort of a trajectory, I guess, of civil rights. Does that make sense? Because I don't know if everybody sees it that way. If everybody in the community sees it that way.
Yeah, I'd agree with you, for sure.
And so
There's like fights that were previously had, like marriage, right? Like marriage was not previously a right. That's something that had to be hard fought and won. But there's still a lot of areas in which there's not quite equity yet, and that we're still seeking that same equity, not just from like a governmental law standpoint, but also like a societal acceptance standpoint.
yeah.
I think,
go ahead.
can I just
Yeah,
say,
go
I
ahead.
think that Dot made a really good point, that it's not just government, it's not just laws, it's people in general that We want to help. We would like folks to be educated and just support humans to human.
Yeah. So I think that you're going back to speaking about sort of the intention and the purpose of the big idea of the podcast, which is how do we help community come together, and there's things that advance a cause, like laws or a fight for justice. Those can advance a cause. It's not quite the same as talking within a community about how are we all human, and why is it important for us as a community to include everybody in it, and how does that make us as a community more of what we want to be and what we should be. So I think it's important when we talk about it as a civil rights movement, and also say, well, what do we want? What's the best we can be as a community, and where does that process come from? And it seems like some of that is some of what we're doing here today, which is a dialogue around it. Dottie, you used the term equity or equality. I think you used the word equity, and I just want to hang out with that for a minute. What's the distinction between welcoming, or the intention of welcoming and affirming, and a feeling that on your part of feeling safe or feeling like you belong? Like they may not be the same thing, and I want to sort of understand that. And this is for each of you, not Dottie. You were the one who used the word equity, but I want to sort of hang out with that for a minute.
Yeah. I think the distinction for me is how much of the feeling is actually genuine. Like, how much can I see actually happening? When I see kind of a corporation change their logo to something that's a rainbow version, right? I get the signal that that's a safe space, but I don't actually feel it, believe it, until there's a conversation that I've had or a thing that I've seen where they're actually championing the community. Um, the same way that you might not fully believe a no weapon sign outside of a seedy hotel, right? Like, there's a semblance of safety, but I won't really see it proved until I walk in there.
Yeah. What's the connection? So safety is one part of it. What's the connection or the distinction between safety and then feeling like you fully belong in that space or with those people or with that group, if that makes sense?
Yeah. For me, I think it's about follow through.
Okay.
Like, I can feel safe and brave to be open and authentic with someone, and they can say, yeah, everyone is welcome, but I want to feel that, know that, see that by your language.
Okay.
By your actions. Those are the things that I'm looking for me. But to feel like I belong, I guess it's something that's just maybe feels natural.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not it's not an effort to accept me in, or it's just natural.
Yeah.
That's what belonging feels like to me.
Yeah, I think to kind of frame it in an example, like the difference in entering a space and, just being invited there, versus entering a space and there may be like little pride flags or something like that around. And then there's a level of entering a space and, being asked what your pronouns are, what your name is, if you have anything that you prefer to go by, just like asking those, leading questions that, like I mentioned earlier, humanize and individualize a person, rather than, maybe seeing something, like makeup where you don't think it should be, or the wrong type of dress or something like that. But, just kind of normalizing those things and kind of shows the spaces that I understand as, safe to go versus, being celebrated and belonging.
Right, right. There are places that are safe or feel safe, but it's not quite the same as being celebrated fully for who you are. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Lindsay touched on being brave versus, safety. And then celebration as well.
So this is just maybe a follow-up question, just in that same space. Is what's the difference between feeling like you need to be brave to go into a space and feeling like it's so right that you don't have to feel brave in that space? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm just and where do you experience that?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Okay, I think sometimes it's instinct.
Yeah.
Like every person has a gut feeling, has an instinct. I think sometimes it's instinct. I don't really know how else to describe it besides that.
Yeah. Dottie, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I think really it's also the people that I'm with too. When I was in college, I was alone and facing a lot of very male-oriented spaces because I was presenting as more male during that time. Um, Walking into those spaces requires you to be brave, but if you're going into it with friends or a partner or somebody that you trust, you feel safe no matter where you're at.
Yeah. Gotcha. Is that part of, how does that fit in with the idea of the chosen family?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's you've found some people that you now hold as your family.
Yeah.
Is that the place where not only you feel like you belong, but you also don't think about, am I safe in this space?
Yeah, they're like mobile safe spaces or little bubbles where, you know, you know that you're gonna be able to rely on that person to, address you as, you've chosen, and just, kind of repeating the term, but celebrating, who you are as a person. They may, as I know some may struggle with correcting people if they use wrong pronouns or something like that. But as Dottie mentioned, like a chosen family or a person that, you can be out with, or a group that you can be out with that will, advocate for you if you may enter into a situation where you begin to feel unsafe.
Right. So they have your back in some of those spaces, and probably are much more in tune with the fact that that's a thing. So some people might look at this at June and Pride Month and say, well, they're celebrating sexual orientation, they're celebrating gay pride, but I think what I'm hearing is there's a celebration of humanness, like who you are, not some part of you or something about you, but who you are as a whole person. Is that making sense?
For sure. Yeah.
Because I don't know that not everybody in the community understands it that way. So what are your thoughts about that, I guess?
For me, my sexual orientation or my label that works for me or my pronouns, those are just pieces of me, right? And they make up a huge part of me as Lindsey, but that's not just it.
Yeah.
Right? I'm an artist.
Yes.
I'm a mental health professional. I'm an advocate. So those are just pieces of an individual.
Right.
There's a lot more that go into every person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's this irony, I guess, where on the one hand, people could look at you and that would be the only thing they see about you. They would define you through that lens.
And judge me through that lens. Yeah.
Yes, and
Yeah.
So you, on the one hand, you don't want that because you're more than that. But when we celebrate all of you, we're not just celebrating that part either, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
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 I think celebrating that I can say it out loud.
Yes.
Yeah. You know, and say just as easily as I can say I'm an artist, or just as
Right.
easily as I can say like I work in mental health,
Right.
you know.
Right. Yes, because people will hear that about you and say, "Oh, that's cool. I'm so excited to hear that about you. Tell me more." Where they might not, if you say, you know, I'm queer.
Yeah.
Yeah, got you.
Yeah, my like sexuality and gender expression and everything is so deeply entwined with what I consider to be me because it took a lot of effort to get to accepting them as part of me. Um, that when we celebrate Pride Month, it's not just about necessarily those things or those labels. It's more about celebrating the individuals who are identifying that way and opening the door for new people who want to start expressing themselves that way.
Yeah. And the idea that for people who maybe have been afraid to say this is how I want to start identifying myself or celebrating myself in this way, you the celebration includes saying you don't have to have parts of you that you don't have to live different parts of you in different spaces. You all of you belongs in all of the spaces, and all of you belongs in the community. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
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 Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That touches on like the humanization point again. Like there's Pride Month because you know, there's a need to recognize a marginalized community. And also within that marginalized community, there's the rest of the human. You know, like I love comics and being out with my dog and, you know, just basic human things. However, that added caveat of being queer and possibly presenting as differently than someone may have been socialized to understand as appropriate may change if a space is safe or not.
Yeah. Gotcha. I want to circle back to we were talking about the difference between sort of welcoming and affirming and feeling safe or feeling like you belong. There's that saying that diversity is and we used the word equity. So there's that saying that diversity is a fact, equity is a choice, inclusion is an action, but the outcome is belonging. And so I'm just wondering, you know, how you guys reflect on that concept. The idea, I think that sometimes people misunderstand when we use the word diversity or difference. People just don't seem to understand that is just the fact of the world. And we sort of, there's that sociological thing that we call the big sort, where people said, well, I'm going to start grouping myself with other people based on similarity rather than saying we're all in this together, and the fact that we're different from each other is probably a good thing. We're probably stronger because we're different. So if we just start with this idea of diversity as a fact, then just reflect for me for a minute about like how do those things play out in either Pride Month or even just sort of in your experience. That was a long rambling question, I know that, but pick something in there that you like.
I think those terms remind me that just because we want to include more folks or include everyone does not mean that we are excluding anyone. It's not
Yes.
bring one in,
Right.
take one out.
Yeah.
It's including all.
Yeah.
Y'all.
Yeah.
That's why I like the term y'all.
You like the y'all. Yeah, we were talking about that. You like the word y'all. And it's not a dichotomy. It's not embracing the fact that we're different doesn't minimize one group or another group or one portion of that. Yeah. Cool.
I grew up in a high school that was outwardly displaying as kind of accepting. But there had been incidents in which I'd witnessed people been bullied for their sexuality. So um, the time came, like, I was agonizing over the decision to tell my partner at the time, and it took like a month to come to that conclusion, and I arranged it like a secret meeting between two secret agents. I finally get up the courage and I go like, I think I'm pansexual, and she goes, I am too. And I'm like, okay. Uh, well, I just built up all this hype. Um, and she goes, well, there's this gay straight alliance club that's after school. I think it would be really good if we could both go. Um, and that was the difference between outwardly presenting as inclusive and actually being inclusive. When I went and everybody had shared their similar stories like that, um, and maybe even some of the struggles that they had had in school, it felt natural to kind of come forward with my own story and feel safe knowing that I could trust it with the people there.
Yeah. Nice. That's a cool example. Each of you also wears another hat. Each of you works at Access Services. Alex and Dottie, you are crisis workers, and Lindsey, you are a CPS, and you are also really a big part of Hope for Tomorrow, which is an important sort of program. So I'm wondering, how does your lived experience impact the way you wear your Access hat? That's one question. And then a second question might be, how do you see some of the issues that we've been talking about playing out in the folks that you are out and serving? So let's just start with that first question about how does your lived experience impact the way you wear your Access hat?
Yeah, I think it's like a recognizing that there's a necessity for safe spaces, and especially being in the crisis program, being able to, go out and be with people who are in the community. And, sometimes their crisis is due to marginalization, due to, not being safe or welcome in their, birth family. And so kind of communicating, that you are a safe space, and you're there looking to provide and support them with finding community, finding resources, finding things that help them belong. Because a lot of the situations that I've come across, there's just this huge lack or a sense of a lack of belonging, and a segregation from community. And so being able to try and restore that is a huge piece of motivation for me.
Yeah, nice.
I definitely bring my whole self to crisis work, and I think it's very helpful when I'm able to go to a client and say, hey, I've had some of the same struggles you've had. Um, that's a huge part of your work as well, is definitely being able to relate to the person and the struggles they've been through. I think one of the first things I did when I got to crisis was compile a big list of LGBTQ plus initiatives like in the area, free or low cost resources that people could access as safe spaces, as well as like gender clinics for anybody who is seeking any kind of resources on transitioning. Um, and we give that out to a lot of clients.
Yeah.
In my role, I'm doing a lot of presentations for students, like
Yes.
youth and high schoolers, and I remember doing a training and contemplating whether I was going to share with this group of students like
Yeah.
my pronouns.
Right.
I share bits and pieces of my mental health journey throughout my presentations, but I decided and I made a commitment to myself to represent and introduce myself with my pronouns. And I found that doing so, having the students have someone in front of them, having a person who could be so open with them was it was good for them.
Yeah.
Because, I don't talk about their stories in front of all of the class, but
Right.
after the class, some of them come up to me and share like, hey, I'm this, or I'm experiencing this, and these people in my life aren't accepting. A big piece of my presentations include finding your trusted adults,
Right.
finding perhaps your chosen family, or the people that you can lean on. So when they come up to me to tell me those things that they don't feel comfortable saying in front of other people, I feel very honored. But it's heartbreaking to know that they can't go home to the same acceptance.
Right, right. And it brings up the sort of the limitation. We provide a good service, and that's a service lane, and you do it well.
Yeah.
It isn't this. It can't find a trusted person for this individual, and so I think that's a lot of what we're trying to get to in this podcast is what can the community do beyond sort of what a service can do. And so you have this focused duration in somebody's space, like you're here for an hour or something, and then there's a conversation afterwards. I'm sure is super important for that person, but it doesn't go beyond that. And so what are some things perhaps that if you just say, wow, I wish for, or I wish the community was doing, what are some things that people listening or people in the community can start to think through, like, how could I be different in a space that would help this? How can I be a trusted person in somebody's life?
Yeah, I think it doesn't take a lot of active effort to do more things right. I think it's more about doing less things wrong. um, like there's no need to actively go out and ask everybody their pronouns all the time, or make a big deal when somebody's experiencing, like, is trusting you with their story. It's more about what do you do with that information when you have it, and are you presenting yourself as trustworthy by respecting everybody who comes to you and respecting different perspectives. For me, it's like seeing that overall person and then seeing, yeah, I could definitely see myself talking to them about this topic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say there's an understanding that things don't go perfectly, and that, it takes practice. So, on the conversation of pronouns, like, if you're in a situation where you're messing some up or getting them wrong or something like that, then being able to quickly, like, correct yourself, or even just committing to trying, is a huge difference maker, just in conversation with someone, and just not assuming how someone identifies based on something like clothing. However, if there are markers of differences, then maybe approaching with curiosity.
Yeah. Nice. Markers of difference. Yeah. I like that.
Yeah, I like the approach with curiosity. I like
Yes.
the way that you worded that, Alex.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a generally good idea
Yeah.
in life, is to approach people with curiosity, and some people are naturally oriented towards that, and some people can learn that maybe. Yeah. When we're talking about names and changing names or changing pronouns, I have an experience in my life. It's a little different, but my younger daughter was born deaf, and so we all learned sign language right away. And I actually am one of the few dads in her class. She went to a deaf school, I was one of the only dads in her class that actually learned sign language. Most families, it was the mother of the family that would learn sign language, and then she would sort of interpret for the rest of the family. And we made a commitment to that we would all just be using our hands. And my older daughter was 2 at the time that Rebecca was born, and we said, if you're going to tell on your sister, you have to use your hands to do it. She was only 2, and so she picked it up really fast. It made me mad how fast she picked it up, because I'm a slower learner when it comes to language. But we had given her a sign name of Becca, which is just the B up here. And she came home when she was, I guess, 6 or 7 years old, and she said, I've changed my name, and it's Rebecca now. It's the R right here. And at first I was a little bit pissed off, because I'm like, well, I gave you that name. Like, we thought through it, and we call her Becca. We don't call her Rebecca, we call her Becca. So it sort of made sense to us at the time. But she was very adamant that this was her choice and she was going to do it. And so she's been, ever since she was 7, she's been Rebecca, not Becca. So I just, it's a small thing, but I think it's a way that I relate to just the idea that people need to be able to identify themselves in a way that makes sense to them, and the rest of us need to try to figure out how to align with that and approach it with curiosity, but to just sort of just to acknowledge that this, we have many expressions of who we are as people, and that should be an okay thing for us to do. That sort of leads me into this other question, which is sort of as the straight cisgendered old guy who has been acculturated for a really long time to think in a very binary way, and who's also sort of trying to recalibrate, trying to do well, to be curious, to interact, engage, connect with people, human to human. What are some things that are helpful or not helpful? And you've covered some of them, but this is just sort of a personal question as from my point of view, just sort of what's helpful.
One thing that's helpful on just conversations, interactions, if someone slips up with my pronouns, and they catch themselves, it's okay, to just do like a quick correction or, oh, my bad, and then correct yourself, rather than making it a big apology. Because then that feels awkward.
Right, sure.
That feels really awkward, and then it turns it into this other thing that I really don't want to get into.
Right. Right. And it's not about me and my mistake. It's really just about you. Right?
If you just correct yourself, let's move forward. We can move forward. Yeah. But I love when someone corrects themselves, because that is, I know everyone who. Not always is someone going to correct themselves, but when someone does, it makes me know that they're trying.
Yeah.
I mean, changing your name is a very complicated and messy process. You have to pick out something you like. You have to trust the people that you're with. You have to pitch a couple that might not be right at first. So I have a whole big variety of people in my life who call me a big variety of things. But one of the most affirming things is that I saw is that people who just treated it as if it was always your name. There was never any name before that, never any problem before that. And if you practice, a lot of times it's as easy as that. You might, by putting a little bit of extra active thinking into it, be able to just pick it up like that. And that's how it was for me at work. Really, Access Services was very affirming, and I was able to talk to my supervisor about it, was able to get changed on everything, and had no problem, which was really, really exactly how I wanted it to go for the rest of my life as well.
Right. Yes, I wouldn't necessarily think through all of the chain reaction of things
Yeah,
an email, how your contacts are listed in different places. Yeah,
right. I've got nicknames for all of my different names. I've got middle. I go by my middle name somewhere. Like there's a million ways in which I'll answer the phone, or when they ask my name at the coffee counter, I have no idea what to tell the person.
right.
Yeah, it's definitely all those things. Just normalizing someone choosing for themselves who they are, and just having the respect and humility to ask them, and then honor them by addressing them as such from there. Because I know, like, there can be a lot of difficulty. Like I know you mentioned with your daughter. Like you thought about that name, you invested in it, and so there's a reason why they're called dead names. Like there was, while transitioning into the other name should be respected and honored for those who knew that person, there's a piece that I think there's a necessity to mourn a little bit, however, not burdening the other person as if it's this huge loss. However, I understand, like with my parents and my name, I had a very masculine name and shortened it and changed it a little bit. And that was celebrated more. And there's just that availability to define oneself, and then commit to trying.
Yeah. And it feels like when you're describing both mourning and celebration, and you said not to put a burden on the person, but it feels like that's some of what's being celebrated is growth. And human growth is good. And when we all belong, we celebrate each other's growth. So what I'm going to do is just say, is there anything else? Is there anything that either you thought of because of something we talked or something we left out that you feel is important? I'm just going to give you guys some time just to reflect on anything else that you think is important.
I think the big piece for me is if you're listening and you want to pursue some resources for yourself or join a larger community, there are resources out there for you, and you're HIPAA protected under any organization. So if you want to go talk to anybody about it, you have the freedom to do that.
Yeah, keep looking for your people. You'll find them. We're here.
Thank you to each of you for coming and being part of this conversation today. It's a really critical one, and I think it really gets to the heart of what we're trying to do in this podcast, which is to explore, to dialogue with each other as humans about the importance of belonging in our community and how we can strengthen our community by building each other up. And so this has been very helpful to me, and I think to our listeners. So thank you, each of you, for coming today. We did talk a little bit about some services at Access. The mobile crisis service is a 24/7 hotline number. It's also a mobile service, so anybody with a crisis or is feeling in crisis in Montgomery County can use that hotline number. You will get a live person to talk to. Alex and Dottie, you described some of what that conversation might be like. And then if it's decided in that conversation that it would be helpful to be in person, then a team will come to you at your location. And Lindsey, you talked a little bit about the peer talk line, and then also the Hope for Tomorrow, which is a presentation that goes into schools. So those are both things that you can see on our website, but also that are services that we provide to the public. So thank you again, guys, for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you all for your time.
Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. We hope that you enjoyed hearing from people who are strengthening our communities every day. Search for and follow us on your preferred streaming platform to hear future episodes.